Welcome to the Flame Tree Myth and Fiction podcast. Hello, welcome to the Flame Tree Myth and Fiction podcast. We are here for our July special episode, and this is me, Olivia, and I'm here with Bea and Nick. So we thought we'd just do a bit of an introduction about who we are, because we had a trailer at the beginning, but we wanted to give you a bit more information and also answer some of your questions, which some people sent in.
Am I supposed to be introducing myself?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Could you introduce yourself?
Right, well,
and where you are as well, actually. That would be fun.
Oh, yes. So, okay. Hi. Yes, hi. I'm Nick. I am the publisher of Flame Tree, but in this context, I'm the producer of the podcast. And we are in our special room in Melbury Mews, which is the tiniest room in Melbury Mews, although actually the old marketing suite is possibly smaller. But we're surrounded by our archive of books, calendars, notebooks of many, many years, and we've carved out a little space where we can do all our recording slightly locked away and with a nice dead sound, so we don't reverberate too much, except for when the trains come.
Yes, that's quite loud.
Yeah. But yes, anyway, that's me. So
hi, it's Bea. In terms of what I do, I am the podcast editor, which also includes audio editing and the story selection, the general programming, and also just the technical edits of the podcast. And Olivia, what do you do? Yes, should have said that at the beginning, but I'm Olivia. I am the podcast coordinator, which is basically just helping out with the programming of the episodes and story selection. That's always a bit of a time-consuming one. It's a multiple-person job, I have to say. And also narrating some of the stories, and I've interviewed a few of the authors we've had on our specials before, so yes, a bit of everything. I think we all do a bit of everything. That's true. And generally, me and Bea are in marketing.
So, as I understand it, really, what we're really doing is a little bit of a retrospective to see how the last few weeks and months have gone, because it was quite a mighty task to set it all up from the beginning. Lots of initial recordings, lots of tests, and lots of discussions with people, and getting lots of feedback. So this is probably the first time we've had an opportunity, really, just to have a little pause and try and discuss what we think we have done, and maybe what we can improve, what people would really like, some explanations about why we've done what we've done.
Yeah, it's been 3 months now, so...
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge achievement.
So for our first episode, way back in May, we ran our first story selection episode, which had 2 stories on cloning and AI, and we wanted to get feedback from everyone. So we've got a few comments at the end of this episode that we'll respond to, but we also, in the meantime, wanted to send out some calls for questions for all the listeners to see if there was anything we could share, any information we could give, or just explanations of the podcast and Flame Tree as a publishing company. So the first question, shall I just go right into it?
Yes.
So from Fiona: I've always been drawn to horror, and from a very early in my discovery of the great British authors in the genre. I've been a huge admirer of Ramsay Campbell. His stories never fail to linger in my mind long after I've finished reading. So I'd love to ask, which horror story from any author has stayed with you the longest and made the deepest impression on you? Thanks for your thoughts.
Both looking at me. So there are an awful lot of stories, really, and we now publish them, which is quite incredible from my point of view. When I was young, I was really taken by Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, because that was the sort of end of a particular period in literature where science and natural philosophy and literature all channeled through, and after that they sort of broke into different fragments. Particularly like a lot of Lovecraft, Call of Cthulhu, that still very much stays with me. I read that when I was very young, I was about 11 or something, and it was just that sense of reaching out of the dark to the edges of the world, to another universe, a world where you didn't quite know what was around the corner. It was that sort of massive sense of dread. And that's actually what Ramsay Campbell is particularly good at. A lot of the good writers on there. the Lovecraftian end of things. They don't reveal the horror straight away. They don't reveal the creature straight away, and they give you that sense of dread and anticipation, which we all feel in the middle of the night in the dark, or when there's something taller than us and we go through the trees and you see a shadow or hear a sound and you don't know what it is, and it's that tension which makes a really good story. So that's what I remember.
Yes, he had one of the stories on our podcast episodes, No Strings. I did like that one. Has that aired yet?
Yep, that aired
okay.
this week.
Yes, that's very creepy at the end.
Yeah.
Didn't enjoy it in that way, but also it's very well written. Great story. And then there's also The Ghost by Catherine Wells, which I found fun because it's not a typical horror in that it's about a young girl and, you know, being jealous that she can't go to a party, and then there's just a creepy illusion at the end that something's a bit amiss, and that's I enjoy that. Not outright horror, and it's fun as well to learn about Catherine Wells because I had not heard about her before, but we did a lot of H.G. Wells when I was at uni. So
I mean, I'm not much of a horror reader. I'm much more of a fantasy person. I'm going to be honest, but we publish a lot of fantasy as well, so I think that's okay to say. But I did The Yellow Wallpaper at uni, which was just a great short story, and that kind of lingered with me. So that one's up there. And then I think from doing this podcast, I've read a few more horror stories. And then I think my favourites so far have been Skin Print by Antonia Rachel Ward, which was in the first episode, and that really stayed with me, very creepy. I don't even know if it's traditional horror or more AI sci-fi. And then I also really liked The Crimson Weaver by R. Murray Gilchrist, which is one of the ones that I read, but it was excellent, very weird, which was it's kind of suitably in our weird horror collection. But
Let me just say one thing. A lot of what we publish is speculative fiction, which manifests as horror, fantasy, dark fantasy, light fantasy, science fiction, and it is that mix of writing. And we do a lot of gothic short stories, but you can have gothic romance and gothic horror, and I think a lot of it's just the exploration of imaginative fiction, and that's why we also have a folkloric element and a mythic element, because that's where a lot of the history of the imagination through humankind and beginnings of civilization, although that's slightly discredited these days, but the beginnings of humankind gathering together and storytelling, right from the point where we as a species looked up and questioned our existence and asked questions about what that thing in the sky is doing and where did those hills come from. And a lot of those questions still manifest today, but they come through the many short stories that we love and we publish and are on our fabulous podcast.
yes, shall I say the next question?
I think you might have to answer the next question. So
I might have to. Okay, go on. Nick, could you ask the next question?
Okay, well, so this one is from Caitlin Quinn. How do you select the stories you read on the podcast?
Oh, that's fitting from your previous answer. It's a very long process in one way, but enjoyable because we have so many stories, and we mainly choose from the anthologies that we publish, although we have had that one Ramsey Campbell story that we haven't published yet. Who knows? So our editorial team have a lot of different spreadsheets for all the anthologies, and that's usually a very useful resource for B&I to sort of go through and see the story length. That's always important because we don't want to do a very, very, very long story. We need to keep them fairly short so that we can pair them with each other. So we'll go through, look at the word count, look at the descriptions, and then we have the books themselves, so we'll read them, pick our favourites, put them on our sort of shared document, and when we do the same for the new stories, we'll do the same for the classic stories, and then we'll sort of look at the two lists and try our best to pair them via a theme or via any sort of way that they can be brought together. They're not always explicitly on the same theme, but yeah, we do our best because obviously our anthologies are on theme, so we've got our modern stories in there and our classic stories, but we don't always want to do the obvious pairing. We want to give it a little bit of a different flavour.
which I think is good because it gives the podcast a different life.
Yeah.
So we do have our newsletter stories, which are on a monthly theme. We have the the thematic Gothic fantasy stories, which have 20 open submission stories chosen from many hundreds of submissions, plus classic stories. So that has a sort of gigantic logic to it. But choosing 2 for a podcast, which is going to be listened to and read to you in the way that people really like when they're travelling or resting, it has a massively different dynamic and is.
And it's important as well to get the narrators right for the right stories and make sure that we, are reading that, like, we're not going to have me and B always in the same storytelling episode because we've got maybe more similar voices, or, just mixing it up a bit so that everything fits together in the episode.
Definitely. I'd say, just leading on from what you've said, is essentially what we do, but I think in terms of where we run into like difficulties I think the hardest thing is the pairs, is trying to make sure that they fit together well. And then once you've got that, you then have to kind of advance a stage where you're sort of reaching out to the authors. We've had it before where we've had like permissions to print a classic story in the anthology, but not permissions to do the audio. And then you really have to start looking into things like that, and then it gets a bit more complicated. But yeah, on the whole, that is the ideal process.
Yes, it is. And there's so many stories to choose from, so while it can be overwhelming, it's also just such a huge, exciting mix of writing to be able to look at and find what we want.
Yeah, we've also got a lot of new releases coming, so that's quite fun to see all of the new stories that we can have on the podcast in the future, and hopefully we can try and time them so it's slightly more live and it's not just all archived stuff that's kind of coming out this month or next month or that kind of thing. So that's kind of the hope.
I can ask the next question, or would you like to?
You ask the next question.
I didn't ask that one. So, Mark says, audiobooks seem to have really taken off in recent years. Why do you think this is, and do you have a favourite reading of a book? And if so, what is it? Of Flame Tree's audiobooks, Ramsey Campbell's The Hungry Moon is a favourite of mine.
Do I have a favourite audiobook? I'd say I'm a big audiobook listener. I'd say I probably listen to one every week or so I'm really into them. But I'd say my favourite one recently has actually been Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins, the new Hunger Games one. And I think if you've read it, you know that it features The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe quite frequently. But the fact that it's in an audiobook makes the poem so much more powerful. And I think if I was reading it, I don't think I would have got it in quite the same way. But it was just so emotive, like actually having it read to you.
Mine's kind of a boring answer, but it's Stephen Fry's Mythos, I think, that one. Because he's got a great voice, and also it's because Greek stories obviously are told they were told back in the past in a verbal audio way. It's kind of like bringing that back. It's not a story that you always want to read. It's fun, like gathering around the campfire and having Stephen Fry tell you a story about the Greek gods is a great way to sit on the tube and listen to a story.
Yes.
So I really like that one.
I probably got there are so many really. There's Stephen King's Outsider, which is a brilliant read. I heard that 2 or 3 years ago. On our own list, Jonathan Jant's Siren and the Spectre. That's a really, really good read. But just to go back on that whole thing about audiobooks and what's going on there, there's definitely a sense that there's a theory that people are reading less, which is true to the extent that phones have taken over the world, the internet's taken over the world. But people are reading. They've just changed their requirements about how they consume content. And a lot of what we have to do and any publisher has to do, you have to think about how do you deliver the story to the place that an audience wants to hear it or consume it or do whatever it is they want to do. So if you travel on the tube or the train now, actually not as many people read books. And sometimes on a carriage you'd be lucky to see a single book. But you do hear a lot of headphones, and they aren't people just listening to music, although that's a good thing. But often that's where audiobooks I think are particularly good, because you can listen to it in the way that people used to listen to the radio years ago, and you can learn and you can educate, and people like to be taken away from them, from the drudgery or the dull journey that they're taking on. So I think that's why audiobooks work particularly well.
I take the Victoria line a lot, so it's actually really hard to listen to audiobooks because that is a very loud tube.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's interesting, yeah.
So that's when I open my actual book.
Oh, excellent. With a big arrow.
Yes.
This is a book.
Oh, yeah, and recently, Stephen K. Stanford's Jubilee has just come out as an audiobook. So our audiobooks are actually back, and that one's brilliant as well, and narrated by the author himself. So this one's from Anonymous. Hello, is it possible to submit short fiction to the Myth and Fiction podcast? If so, what is the process, please? Many thanks.
Not at the moment, but never say never.
Never say never. We do run a lot of open submissions, so if you think your short story would fit in any of those themes, we've got a lot coming up.
So many open submissions.
Consider submitting it to that, and then once it's published, we could put it on the podcast quite easily.
Yeah, we've got about 14 coming out in the next couple of months, just for books that are being published next year. So there's for all different genres: horror, sci-fi, fantasy, romantasy as well. Yeah, if you go to our blog, submission calls are always open. And yeah, as we were saying before, the current process for choosing stories is from the books that we've already published, just because that's, part of the Flame Tree picture, and that's what we are promoting. And there's other ways around it.
Yes, but once the podcast is established, which it's early days, it's 3 months. I mean, obviously the work going into those 3 months is enormous, but the podcast itself will evolve and take on a life of its own, and we need to adapt to whatever is going on and figure out how we want to grow what we do. And one option, obviously, in the future is to take submissions for it, but not quite yet.
So the next question is from Nathan Chatelier, who is one of our narrators. You've heard his voice a few times in our stories. And he has asked us, where did you get the music?
Yes. Hi to Nathan, because he's one of my favourite people, and I've done a few projects with him. He's a wonderful actor as well as a voice actor with a lovely liquid gold voice.
He's got a great voice.
Yes, and it is his job. That's what he does. The music is actually written by Alan Stroud, who is a science fiction author, one of our science fiction authors, and he has written about 14 tracks, some of which we've released actually, to accompany his Fractal series, particularly Fearless and Resilient. He's currently writing a new book in that series, and have a number of ebook episodes which are essentially ebook only titles. But his music is very cinematic, very much like the sort of music you'd hear, the Hans Zimmer type music on Interstellar or Blade Runner. And so we took a while to test that out, to try and find the right sort of timbre for the podcast, because there are so many different ways. Some people go straight in to the voice. Some people have a musical ident. I quite like the idea of having a musical ident, because then you know what's coming up in a busy life. But Alan, I know, is very pleased to have the music used in this way.
So this is another one from Anonymous, but they've asked, where did we get the image for the podcast graphic?
Well, it is a dome in a temple in Morocco, the view up into the sky. So it has that sense of heat because it's a dome in a hot country, but also looking upwards to a beautiful design. And it's merged with, I can't remember which galaxy it is, but it's a spiral galaxy which came from one of the early Hubble telescope shots, and merged with that, and then used another technique on top of that, which was to engrave. I'm a big fan of 19th century engravings, and just like that sort of organic feel to it. So it's a merge of all of those different elements, and in my mind at least, that combines all the various different elements within the podcast. So it has the kind of the science fiction and the depth of space. It has that sense of origin. It has that sense of different cultures, and a sense sort of being rooted in the past but looking out into the future.
That's very cool. So this part would be some comments and questions we got from the feedback group, which I mentioned earlier. So we did this for the first episode. We basically just wanted to let everybody that was listening know that there was a chance to give us your feedback and comments, and we're obviously going to try and implement as much as we can. We want to make it the best podcast we can for the audience and for our listeners. So the first one we've got written down is from a member of the feedback group who said, "Why did you choose to read stories on the podcast instead of having discussions every week?"
So in one of our many podcast tests, we did actually trial this method of podcasting where we did have author guests, tips and tricks, industry talks, and we tried to include all of them, but then we just found it wasn't
very cohesive.
It wasn't very cohesive. It was quite hard to link everything together, and I think because so many of our authors are international, the sound quality was just quite variable. And I also think, to be honest, our short stories are just great, and it's hard to find a short story audiobook. So this seemed like quite a good way of incorporating our short stories in an audio format.
Yes, I think, but I think you've struck on something there. We have published a great many, hundreds and hundreds of short stories, and we've had thousands of submissions, and we really do celebrate the short story. One of the great things about it is that we've had so many submissions from many, many different countries around the world, and from different types of people with different perspectives, and it's something about the short story form which allows people to express themselves concisely, and it's a treasured art for as far as we're concerned. It's a privilege to be able to read someone's story and to deliver it in an almost old-fashioned storytelling way, because that is how the stories and the mythologies of our world were created originally, by people gathering around the fireplace and telling stories. So in some ways there's a sort of slight sense of that, but also it's just a great way of different people sharing different stories from different places.
And just practically, we really wanted to do one episode a week, and getting author guests that often can be difficult, especially with the international element of the audio quality being a bit variable. And yeah, this makes the most sense for us. And we obviously have incorporated the interviews with doing that once a month, so it's not something we don't want to do.
For sure. I thought it's quite a nice idea to have a short story in an audio format because of the way that people listen to podcasts on the move before bed, and to be able to start a narrative and finish a narrative quite quickly. There's something that suits the podcast format about that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And doing two is like leaving people with something to think about as well.
Definitely.
But also, I think it does give us the opportunity to focus on the stories in the way we've said. But where we have trade show events and conventions, we can then do interviews with people, and it gives a different sort of flavour if we can do people, if we can interview people in that sort of setting, and then rely on that, I think, over time.
Another one from our podcast feedback group: are the narrators writers themselves? I'll go first. I am not a writer myself.
I did actually study writing at university, but have I done it since? No. So I can't claim that. But we do have writers amongst our narrators. So Shilpa Varma is our writer in residence, and she's a great writer, writing lots of stuff for Flame Tree at the moment, helping us with our marketing, and obviously narrating the stories. So
I'll link her blog in the description.
yes, she's got a blog at the moment with us called Between Worlds.
I'm a resting writer.
And Nick
Or
has
rested
lots.
writer. Yep.
As different aliases.
Jake Jackson.
And others.
Are we not allowed to
Crossword
say
and
that?
puzzle writer.
Yeah, and music as well.
Music.
All of our music titles and various other things. But I have written a lot of science fiction. I used to have my own Fantastic Worlds podcast, which was lots of short stories. I would do a story write a story in 2 hours every Saturday morning. Then I would edit it on Sunday morning and record it on Sunday evening. And after 110 episodes, I got a bit tired.
Yeah,
Quite crazy.
So, yeah.
And I don't know about the other narrators, but we have Amanda and Nathan.
Oh, obviously Cheryl.
And Cheryl, oh yes.
Cheryl, who's been on the podcast quite a few times, is a writer of ours. She wrote Black Friday,
Yes.
which is a speculative fiction anthology.
Yes. She's a great writer and reader. She reads the stories without any mistakes, which B and I cannot claim for ourselves.
She's an editor's dream. I barely have to touch them. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's welcome any day.
Yes. But yeah, I don't know about anyone else. So.
No, I mean, generally speaking, I mean, I know Nathan isn't a writer. I'm sure he's dabbled, but that's not quite his chosen. But Amanda is not a writer, but she's an actor.
All very creative people.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Except me.
Pretty creative.
Untrue.
Yeah. A member of our initial group says, can you incorporate audience thoughts in the comments section of each platform?
So we actually do have an open podcast feedback form. So if you follow the Linktree link in bio, you will see that there's a feedback form linked. I've also linked the feedback form in a lot of the episode descriptions, and this is just an open form where we encourage people to leave any comments or questions, and we will, of course, try and answer them.
Yeah, that's sort of a good way to do it anonymously, because I know that some people don't like to post on social media platforms, but they're also open to any comments on our Instagram when we post, or even on the Spotify or Apple or
YouTube has a comment section
YouTube
as
comments.
well.
Yep.
Please do comment. We would enjoy it, unless it's.
Well, we hope to.
Yeah, we hope we enjoy it. Right, that was it. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that seems like quite a good question to end on, because if you have any more questions, then you can put them in the podcast feedback
No one can say that
form.
term.
And no one can say podcast.
It is the end of the day.
Yeah. But yeah, we hope to do another Q&A further
Further
down the line.
Mm-hmm. Jinx. Yes, we just thought it'd be a nice way to end the first 3 months of the podcast and give you some more information. Please do keep listening. We enjoy making it.
Shall I give a little hint at August?
Oh, yeah.
Shall I give them a little
Yeah,
sneak
Yeah.
peek? So in August, it's quite mythology and folklore heavy in August, which is quite exciting for some of our other readers who might have been less interested in our more horror podcasts. So yeah, we're switching it up slightly in August, but it's all very exciting.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.
See you next time.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye from Flame Tree.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Flame Tree Myth and Fiction podcast. If you like this podcast, please remember to recommend it to a friend. Goodbye for now.